on, everybody? Welcome back. My name is Liam and I pick fights. Today on the show, I'm going to be giving you my first look at UFC 289. I'm excited that we have a UFC pay-per-view back in our lives. Only 11 fights on the card, not the greatest offering on paper, but the UFC is going back to Canada. So I'm sure that it's going to be a raucous crowd. There's 5 Canadians on the card, so a lot to look forward to. And, on my normal show, we start at the bottom of the card. On Thursdays, we work our way up to the top. We go over with all our research and analysis. But today, I'm going to be bringing you more of my first thoughts, some top line opinions, some top line thoughts here. We'll talk about the betting odds, my reaction to those as well as we delve through. And if you guys have opinions, thoughts, questions, anything you want to fire off, go ahead and do that in the chat as we go here. Happy to address those. This is a little bit more informal, a little bit more of a free-flowing show. So appreciate you guys that are rocking with us at 12:20 in the East. Had a little bit of technical difficulties, but without further ado, let's kick it off with the main event of the evening, the only title fight on the bill. And we've got Amanda, the Lioness Nunes, widely regarded as the GOAT in WMMA. She's taking on Irene Aldana. Mexico looking to get another UFC champion. They have 3 fighters with current holds on a piece of the title, right? Yair Rodriguez still just has that interim strap. But when you're talking about a country, a region that is surging right now in terms of their access to UFC hardware, it's certainly Mexico and Brazil trying to defend that turf here in Canada. Weird kind of matchmaking in that sense, but overall, it's a fun matchup. It's compelling. When you think of Amanda Nunes, the first thing that comes to mind is her power. She's an extremely powerful woman, very strong, big arms. And normally she's dominated women with the fact that she hits so hard. I actually have a jiu-jitsu coach who trained with Amanda Nunes, back in the day. And he said he's seen her personally, with his own 2 eyes, knock out men in the training room, with some regularity. So absolute beast, Amanda Nunes. But you also got to remember she's been doing this for a very long time. She's got 2 championship belts at home. So it's pretty low stakes for her every time she goes out there nowadays. I feel like that Juliana Pena rematch really brought the best out of her because she lost the fight. She came back. I thought she was done. I thought based on that performance in the Pena fight the first time that she was done as a fighter. I thought she had lost the competitive drive, the spirit. Getting embarrassed by a fighter like Juliana Pena, that'll do something to you. That'll bring you back. That'll get that hunger going. That'll get you out of bed early to train. And she's got her own facility. I thought that was a little bit of a red flag going into the rematch. She looked great. She had the cardio to go. She fought much better. She fought smart, but it's not like she fought, much different than she had in the past. She just introduced a little bit more stance switching and kind of exposed that Juliana Pena didn't have that many advantages if Nunes came in shape, ready, prepared to go 5 hard fives. And Chael Sonnen talks about it all the time. I think it's very true. Sometimes it's the fight that's harder than you expect. Amanda Nunes thought, I'm going to steamroll this girl. Went out there, threw a lot of heavy punches at her, didn't expect the level of resistance that she got. And when she was on the other end of it, she started to fold up shop in that first meeting. Second meeting, she went there prepared for a hard fight. She went there prepared to dominate. She went there prepared for 5 rounds. And when she had opportunities to finish, she didn't take them. She absolutely wanted to deliver a message, go out there, put a beat down, make sure that there was no doubt that she was better than Juliana Pena. And then Pena ends up pulling out of the fight. Amanda Nunes didn't really want this booking, I don't think, with Irene Aldana. I think this is a fight that she would have preferred to avoid for as long as she can, because Irene Aldana, she doesn't have the shiniest record on paper. I believe 14-6 off the top of my head. And she's lost a couple pivotal fights in her career, the Holly Holm fight being the one that comes to mind. I was very confident that Irene Aldana was going to win that fight. And Holly Holm, vintage performance, went out there, used the wrestling, used the grappling, got a hold of her. And if you had to criticize Aldana, her wrestling and grappling continues to be a work in progress. Macy Chiasson had a lot of success in round 2 in the top position. But, I got to say, Irene Aldana has dynamic power in women's MMA, and that's a rare trait. And that's something that matches Amanda Nunes. It's what makes this matchup compelling. And what may draw Amanda Nunes to a wrestling and top heavy game plan here. I'm curious to see how Amanda approaches this fight. I think that Amanda is also going to try and mix in her kicks, but Irene Aldana has very good low kicks. She has good boxing, crisp shots in the pocket. She knocked out Ketlen Vieira with a big right hand, left hook. She landed a bunch of big shots in that fight. So I feel like overall, I've seen a lot of improvement from her. I've also seen her jiu-jitsu game coming along. I've seen her getting more aggressive. She made a really critical error in the Chiasson fight in round 2 that ended up costing her the round, but she almost had a sweep of her own. She just got a little bit over aggressive, and maybe instead of looking for the knee bar and ending the fight, she tried to turn in, she tried to, maybe rush the position. And I feel like she ended up getting overexposed there. But then in round 3, she comes back, she's able to get, some good shots off on the feet while reacting to pressure, and then gets taken down, finds the finish off of her back. I still can't even understand how that was a finish. Macy Chiasson finding new ways to lose in MMA. God bless her for it. But kick to the liver. I've never taken a liver shot like that, so I'm in no position to speak ill. But it was a really shocking knockout. You look, the crowd had no idea what happened in that fight. They were looking around. Joe Rogan was looking around like, what's going on here? So shout out to everybody rocking with us in the chat. A lot of the homies are in here. Fight Talk. My dog Liam, appreciate you, brother. Mr. D in the building. Late night Fight Talk with Liam. Of course, brother. Have to bring the heat. No matter the time, no matter the place, we go to sleep when the job's done. Pena got knocked down so many times. It was like she was doing an up-down drill. Absolutely. And my guy Daz says, sup, Liam, if Amanda brings out the baby stroller at face-off, think I may have to fade her. Yeah, man, we've definitely seen, when everybody shows up with the family, the wife and kid situation, it could be dicey, right? I think that when you're looking at this fight in particular, I'll be curious to hear what each fighter has to say a little bit in the lead up. I think that Irene Aldana, just in terms of pure motivation, she's obviously got the motivation on her side here. Amanda Nunes been there, done that, mountaintop, everything, right? No personal grudge against this woman, Irene Aldana. Irene just has goals and dreams, and she's 35 years of age, same age as Amanda. She wants to get to her dreams. Amanda's already had it all. She's done it all. She's gotten the big, fancy cars and the everything else. She's been at the top of the world. She's the GOAT. Irene Aldana struggled her way up the division, struggled through the skills, improved along the way, got some big wins, suffered through some tough losses. And I just think that, she's the woman that really wants this right now. And so for me, that's going to make her a tempting underdog. Let me just click over to fightodds.io here for 1 second. They've got sports interaction right now, -305, best price on Amanda Nunes. And you're looking at a +280 comeback on FanDuel Sportsbook for Irene Aldana. So, they're definitely favoring Amanda here. It makes sense. She's the champion. She's got a lot of wins in the UFC, a lot of finishes. She's got skills on the feet. She's got skills on the ground. But I do think that Irene Aldana is a live underdog in the spot. I'm going to be considering her that way. I think that she is going to pack, power in the hands as a underdog. She knocked out Ketlen Vieira in the very first round. Another Brazilian fighter with good ground skills. Fight never got to the ground, right? The fight was over in the first round. And one of the things that I noticed that made me think, maybe she could be live in this spot is Amanda Nunes against Juliana Pena in that first fight. She started to get very emotional, right? Juliana was having some success. She was coming forward. She was throwing a lot of shots. And, Amanda started to get a little bit emotional in her reaction. She wanted to throw back. She wanted to get in her face. She wanted to hit. She wanted to really push a pace. And I felt like it ended up compromising her in the end. And I feel like Aldana against Ketlen Vieira, I just rewatched it before this. And, I saw Ketlen Vieira getting more angry. She didn't like getting touched. And Ketlen was doing a good job. She was landing big shots. But I feel like Aldana is the one who thrives in those fights that are back and forth wars, that are gritty, that are really tough. And so I just think that she's going to represent a live underdog in this spot. Very, very interesting fight here. And shout out to everybody that is lighting up the chat. Guys, we got 33 people rocking with us live. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. If you haven't already, drop a like on the show. Hopefully more people will come in and join the conversation. We already got a ton of sharp people in here, so appreciate each and every one of you guys that are contributing. Furio Bet says, came here to hear why I should not max bet Erceg and Aldana. Brother, you're not going to get the arguments from me. I don't know if they'll be getting max plays. I'm looking at keeping it very tight this year, keeping it, high ROI, low risk. That's my goal for the year. That's my goal with the work that I'm putting out. Last week, two bets. We ended up profitable, but just picked our spots very closely. Ended up with some closing line value on Felipe Lins as well. So I think that my guy Eryk makes a great point as well in the chat. How many more fights do you think Nunes has? I always make the point when the UFC thinks they could do more business with you, is it more likely that Aldana has 5 more fights with the organization or Nunes has 5 more fights with the organization? I think it's a difficult thing to say. I think it's a tricky one. So for me, it's going to take some real, special effort here from Amanda Nunes. And I think that this may be one of her last title defenses if she gets it. So I never want to be the guy that missed the train on an opportunity to fade a champion on their way out. And I think that, people called me crazy for betting Grasso and a few other people. And sometimes you look silly when you fade somebody, sometimes you look silly when you fade the dominant champion. But then when everybody else misses the boat and you're there, it feels pretty good too. So in this spot, I'm definitely not going to be laying 3-1 chalk on Amanda Nunes. But I do think that, there's a lot of different ways that you can consider playing this fight. But for me, it's going to be a dog or pass situation on the main event at UFC 289. And I think it should be a good scrap. Two ladies that most of the time like to go out there and bang it out on the feet. And I think that bodes well for us as UFC fans. So should be a fun main event. And, you don't always talk about women's main events ending inside the distance. I would not be surprised at all if this fight ends inside the distance. I think that Nunes could get it done on the ground. I think that Irene Aldana could get it done on the ground. And I think that on the feet, both these women possess a lot of power. So fascinating fight. I like it. And I think that the underdog's live. Next up, we've got the co-main event of the evening, guys. Charles do Bronx Oliveira taking on Beniel Dariush. And this is another really compelling fight because you got two guys that live by the sword and die by the sword. Two guys that kind of fight right on the edge. And I don't know that Beniel Dariush always gets the credit he deserves throughout the course of his career, his body of work. But right now is like the peak of Beniel Dariush, like credit and respect. And maybe Charles Oliveira has taken a dip in that because he got finished by Islam Makhachev. And frankly, that was not a very competitive fight. I wasn't sure how competitive it was going to be, but I was pretty confident that Islam was going to get the job done there. And the reason being is because he's got the Dagestani wrestling, able to get on top. He's also got patient striking on the feet and a lot more defensive due diligence, right? Charles throws himself into the fire. He's not afraid of getting hit. He's not afraid of taking some damage. And I think Beniel Dariush, the same thing can be said of Beniel. I think Beniel sometimes fights right on the edge. I think he fights like a gangster. And I think against Charles, that's a dangerous thing to do. So, this is a really fun fight. Another fight where I think Beniel Dariush right now, he's got momentum. He's got some good positive things on his side. He'd be a fresh title challenger. He would be a lot more compelling potentially against Islam Makhachev. How would he fare there? But he's not a young guy. He's not a spring chicken either. So, Beniel, he's a guy that hasn't always taken advantage of some of his opportunities in the UFC. And I'm mostly talking about on the microphone because, again, in the octagon, how could you really criticize the guy? He goes out there, puts on fun fights, puts hands to people. But sometimes after the fight, when he's got the opportunity to market a big fight, he's talking about Elon Musk and getting a Tesla and all this stuff. I love Benny. And so that's why it's just painful to see sometimes. But I think overall, Beniel Dariush, he's a hard guy to sleep on. And he's come through in this short favorite range before. He's been in a lot of closely lined fights as well in the UFC. And The thing I would be most afraid of if I'm a Beniel Dariush backer here is just him getting knocked unconscious because I think he's very tough. I don't think he's ever going to try and quit on you. But I don't know that his cardio is a selling point necessarily. I think he normally spends himself for victory. And he's had a couple of these fights where when he gets the finish, he looks like he's on death's door himself, but he just finds a way. He digs deeper. And Charles is a guy that could do some of that himself. So it's a really fun fight. It's compelling. Two bangers at lightweight. I'd probably be tempted towards the under here. I got burnt with this a little bit last week, right? I said I picked my spots, had Felipe Lins bet him plus 140, close plus 110. I was happy about that. And then I took the fight doesn't go to decision in Caceres and Pineda. But you always got to remember it's a two-way dance, right? You got to account for both individuals. And Daniel Pineda, that was the sixth time in a 43 fight pro career that he's gone to decision. But for Alex Caceres, he routinely goes to decision. So you got to excuse me, account for that sometimes in your handicapping process. And I bet the fight doesn't go to decision at what I thought was a very fair price. But the guy who won it had no interest in finishing the fight. He would land a big body kick and let the guy have 6-7 seconds to recover. It was absolutely unbelievable. So for me here, I think Beniel is probably the more durable fighter, but I don't think it's by a huge amount, because Beniel's been hurt. He's been rocked. And he's been on the edge of being finished. And normally he could bail himself out easily with the grappling when he gets hurt or anything like that. He could grab a hold of people, and you can't disrespect his grappling. Like Beniel Dariush helped change the game in grappling. But when you talk about Charles Oliveira, he's one of the most winningest submission grapplers in MMA history, in UFC history. And I think that can't be slept on at all. It's about practical application. Beniel Dariush is a very good wrestler and grappler, but he's not always out there finishing guys. He's a guy that got submitted by Michael Chiesa. I think people forget that fight. So I don't think that Charles Oliveira should at all be slept on here, but he did pull out of the fight. He has had a little bit of questionable, interactions with the media and things. So I want to see what Charles do Bronx shows up this week. I want to see if he's emotional or if he's dialed in. And I think if he's dialed in, he's a very dangerous guy. Probably the most dangerous guy Beniel's fought. You look around some of these, some of the win streak, obviously Carlos Diego Ferreira, good wins for Beniel. But then some of the other wins, the Drakkar Closes of the world and some of these other guys, I think the Scott Holtzman knockout and some of these things, they maybe didn't age as well as you would have hoped. And Charles Oliveira, on the other hand, he's beaten some guys at the real top end of the division. Is his win streak replete with some sketchy guys too? Yeah. His run up was a little bit sketchy for a while, but he's also been around for a long time fighting upper echelon guys, and he's had more UFC experience. He's been around the MMA game longer. He has more fights overall by a huge margin. So both of these guys, incredibly compelling stories, but I just can't count out Charles Oliveira. So I haven't bet this fight, but I want to wait and see where this line ends up. If there is not a significant move in the line towards the Beniel Dariush side, I would be concerned if I'm a Beniel Dariush backer, because it seems like everybody is on him this week. And I'm going to wait and see if that changes as well. Public perception is big for me. I don't like to be on the side that everybody's on. I don't like to follow the masses. I like to try and do my own thing. I like to try and come up with my own independent reads. And I like Beniel Dariush, but I have bet against him before. And it's because he does put his chin on the line. He can be hurt. And I thought that the last fight was going to be where the rubber met the road, and he did a great job. He landed a huge punch against Gamrot, but I thought if he hadn't landed that massive punch that dropped Gamrot, and that's a big if, right? We can't erase that. That did happen, but I'm just saying, I thought that some of the optics there, if it was a decision, also could have been going against him. I thought he could have been losing some of those rounds. I think Charles Oliveira is a little bit more dangerous, even than Gamrot. So I think Gamrot, a guy on the ups, a guy whose future is brighter right now. But I just think that in terms of who's more lethal in the cage, I mean, it's not really a question right now. Next up, folks, this is a really interesting one. I got to go back and watch a little more tape on this. But to be honest with you, Mike Malott, he's not an easy guy to tape. His career is like 12 minutes or something. I'm half kidding. I think he had one 15-minute fight in there, but he's not had very many long fights. He's not had all that many fights overall. His career stretched out over a long period, but recently he's been looking aces, and part of that was fighting Johan Lionesi. I cannot discount that, but also I think that he's been showing a lot of good things. When you look at Mike Malott, he was always known for being dangerous on the feet. He had good power, good striking, good mechanics. Defense not really there. Even to this day, his defense is not very good on the feet. Mickey Gall was landing some big shots. It's gotten better. He does a decent enough job. He moves around a little bit, shifts his head. He tries to be evasive, but he doesn't have the biggest range in the world for a welterweight. But he does have power, and he's pretty natural. He's pretty fast. Got a decent athleticism to him. You could tell by his musculature, by his build. Malott's a pretty strong guy. And I love, love, love his guillotine. He is an excellent, excellent guillotiner. He's from Team Alpha Male. No surprise there. But you look at the guy's fundamentals. I mean, the way he choked out Smotrisky on Contender Series was absolutely a thing of beauty. Sits to it, has it pretty much dead to rights. Smotrisky actually does the right thing. I talked about this with the clip that's going around, going viral. Sean O'Malley, guillotining Gomi. Gomi didn't even roll to his back. He didn't even give himself a chance to survive there. But what you saw from Malott was a perfect answer. Smotrisky flatbacks himself, and Malott gets height. He extends his arm. And then as Smotrisky tries to sit into the basically into his base, try and get his knees underneath him in order to survive. Malott then cranks it all the way up like high elbow style, and he just had the kid in all sorts of trouble. Smotrisky's tapping through in between his legs like it was a disaster. Mike Malott, he's done that to a number of people. But you know what I really love about Mike Malott? On rewatch is just his instinct to finish fights. He knows when he's got somebody hurt with the hands. He knows when he can submit them on the ground. And I like that about him. That's a really good way to, ensure you win, is to make sure you get it done early. But I also do have some considerations about what if the fight gets extended? Because Fugitt, I think, is tough as nails. Even the fight against Morales where he got stopped there, he wanted to keep fighting. I think that he was glad probably because he had taken so much abuse that the referee stopped it. He just stayed down on a knee for a minute. But he looked like he was building back to his feet when the referee intervened. So for me, Fugitt is a very tough guy. He'll fight you to the bitter end. And, he's going to have a reach advantage here. He's going to be a little bit taller. He doesn't have the greatest chin in the world, but he doesn't have a bad chin. It just is a little bit exposed sometimes in striking exchanges. He's a little bit off balance at times, leads to knockdowns, even when he's not altogether hurt. So those are some concerns on the Fugitt side, especially when you're talking about fighting a Canadian Superboy in the featured bout in Canada. I think that's going to be a big, feature spot for the UFC, talking about this guy who is actually really talented and has some finishing potential and coaches a Team Alpha Male. He's positioned himself in a lot of the right ways. Excuse me. Boy, that's the beauty of having a guest. Is you don't have to talk all that much, You start running your mouth for a while, you get a little bit dry mouth over here. But excuse me, folks, we're right back to it. Fugitt, what stood out to me as well about the tape that was concerning here, he actually got guillotined really quickly by Nick Maximov on Submission Underground. If you guys are aware of that promotion, it's Chael Sundin's deal that he runs. For UFC Fight Pass. It's a grappling only competition. You guys may be familiar with Nick Maximov. He had a few fights in the UFC. He's a good grappler, but he also was choked, in like 45 seconds by Andre Petroski in the UFC. So I think it's a really tricky fight to break down here because I feel like Malott has like clear things that he could do to win this fight. Like, I think he could absolutely knock out Fugitt on the feet. I think he's got power. I think Fugitt's been hurt on the feet before. I think that Fugitt, is going to be trying to stick it to Malott and get a hold of him. Malott also has good knees. He's got good clinch work. He's pretty solid with his Muay Thai. But I do have some worries for Malott here if the fight gets taken to the ground and he is not into an insta sub scenario because we haven't really seen him get pressed and extended on the ground. I've watched a few of his grappling matches. He's all right. I think he's very good. He's obviously better than me. I say all these things as an analyst, not as a peer, right? Mike Malott would kick my ass, but I'm saying when you look at his grappling style, Fugitt may be able to extend this guy a little bit from on top, may be able to lay on him, may be able to try and put him underneath in the half guard. So those are some things where I think it becomes an interesting fight. Also, everybody in the world seems to love Mike Malott in this spot. Tapology isn't everything, but he's like 90+% of the votes on Tapology. And you're looking at a 70% money line. So I would assume there's some sharp resistance here on the Fugitt side at minimum. And I'll be curious to see how this line moves over fight week as well, because if it starts blowing out to minus 300, that's going to be something that tells me, maybe the bookmaker respects the money that's coming in on Malott. But, if they just keep hanging the same number all week and everybody has got a Mike Malott ticket in Canada, that's going to tell me something. That's going to tell me something. So I'm going to be patient here. I don't feel like I need to force my hand. This is one of the tighter fights in terms of market width, especially on the underdog. You're looking at like plus 165 to plus 175. You're really not seeing much outside that range. So I think that for me, that's something I'm going to pay a lot of attention to. Let's talk about one broad theme here as we move along the card. And I truly appreciate you, Daz, my man, with the dono. Never asked for, but always truly appreciated. I love doing these conversations. I love facilitating these, and hopefully everybody learns something and enjoys the conversation. It's always a blast, and I love hearing from the sharp people in the chat as well. Shout out Big Bird. UFC says Mike has been at Niagara top team for a while. Don't think he had Team Alpha Male anymore. Fair play. Yeah, for sure. I think that he's done cross training for most of his career between Team Alpha Male, Niagara Top Team, I think is one of the newer places he's trained. He trained at Champions Creed, I think, for a while as well. So I think he's done the rounds, getting good work around the world. Furio says Mike Malott at minus 2xx feels really gross to me here, and I love Malott. Fair play. Bailey says you the GOAT, Liam. I appreciate you, Bailey. Like I said, it's my pleasure. And I think that overall, though, you got a very competitive fight here between two welterweights past 30 years of age. Malott's the younger guy here, but again, Fugitt's got a little bit of length on him. He's fought probably the much tougher brand of competition in the UFC. They have a common opponent in Solomon Renfro. Renfro, if you guys remember, was absolutely floored by Fugitt. I don't think he had a single moment of success in that fight, and I say that with a lot of respect. I think Solomon Renfro's a beast. I think he's had a couple tough beats. I think he's taken on a lot of really tough challenges young in his career. So I think he's got a ton of athletic potential. I think he can bounce back. But when you look at the Fugitt fight, Fugitt came out and he's going bang, 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 just throwing a lot of huge shots, right? Throwing a ton of kicks on the feet. And that for me, was a little bit instructive, right? Where you go out and you see the Malott fight. Malott was getting blasted by Solomon Renfro. Solomon Renfro is walking him down, landing most of his shots. I thought he hurt Mike Malott in that fight. But then Mike Malott was able to rally and find a nice, opportunity and basically clubs the guy and instantly hops on his back and chokes him out. So it was unbelievable finishing instincts from Mike Malott. It was good reaction. And that was the only thing I'll say to push back against my guy, Furio. I do think he makes a great point here about his game isn't very big favorite friendly. He's not proven to win decisions. I think that's a good point. But I think you had also made a point about him maybe not being as tough, or maybe I misread that. But yeah, basically, man, it's just for me, Malott. I'm not sure if I could count out his toughness here either, because I feel like both these guys will fight you to the death. But I think somebody's going to get finished here, just based on the way that these two approach MMA. Neither one of them has great strike and defense. Neither one of them makes perfect decisions, I would say, in the grappling, but both are very aggressive. So just a fun welterweight scrap here in the featured bout. And I gotta say, you know, this is where the card will start to come back to reality. But I think that top three is very fun. I don't think that it's one where you're writing home about that Mike Malott fight as the featured bout, but I think it's fun. I think Fugitt's maybe an underrated but very talented guy in the welterweight division. Two guys that could use some shine, that could use some opportunity. They go out there and put on fun action fights and answer when the UFC calls. So I'm not mad at that. And Beniel Dariush and Charles Oliveira. I mean, who could possibly push back on that? Absolutely a stellar booking at lightweight. The only thing you could maybe ask is that it was 5 rounds. It's only going to be 3 here. And I think that also makes it a more fun fight because it's going to allow both guys to just let go completely, fire all their attacks, and come out hard for 15 minutes. I don't know that they could push it for the full 25. Yeah. I did not mean to throw you under the bus there, Furio. I was trying to read a couple comments at once there, and you had a couple abbreviations. I misread what you were saying. But we can move along to the next fight here. And this is where we've got Dan Ige taking on Nate Landwehr, Nate the Train in the UFC. This is a fun fight, but it feels almost like a TV fight. I feel like Dan Ige, he's earned some respect in the UFC. Went out there, knocked out the Canadian Gavin Tucker. I think Dan Ige, he's put together a pretty solid resume. I just pulled up his Tapology. We'll go through it a little bit. And like I said, this is my first look. So, he loses to Chan Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie. He loses to Josh Emmett, loses to Movsar Evloev. And, those are 3 losses that you could really sort of give him a break. He gets the win via knockout over Damon Jackson, looked like a huge favorite there. Like I mentioned, that win via knockout over Gavin Tucker. I thought that that Josh Emmett fight was really close, with Dan Ige. I thought that was a competitive scrap. And I think that Dan Ige, he's kind of one of these guys that he's an all-arounder. He's got good power in the hands, but he's something of an all-arounder. I'm not sure that he stands out in the wrestling or the grappling particularly. His cardio is pretty good, but, he's also at times struggled with shots to the body. So I think that's something that I'm going to be paying attention to. Boy, this is an interesting fight, man. Nate has overperformed my expectations for him, certainly. Going out there beating Onama pretty cleanly, despite fighting in an absolutely savage way. It's impressive. It's definitely impressive, but I almost feel like Nate the Train's been like high rolling his position in the UFC, but I feel like we've also seen a significant shift since he came to MMA Masters. I feel like at MMA Masters we've seen some improvements, and there's been guys training at MMA Masters that people consider high level. Colby Covington, definitely one of them. Ricardo Lamas, guy that trained there as well. So that gym, that camp deserves some respect. And I think that Nate the Train in the UFC, maybe he's the next guy for MMA Masters, but Extreme Couture, they're, invested in Dan Ige. He's a solid fighter, man. He's just not an easy guy to beat anywhere. And he's very tough and durable. So I feel like the more durable fighter here is Dan Ige. And I feel like he's got probably more power as well. I think he probably has the wrestling and the grappling to keep this upright. So I understand Dan Ige being the favorite here. One thing I want to do, guys, is just circle back. I didn't necessarily run through the odds for all these fights, so we could just talk about my impression on all these odds. I know I talked about the main event. I think I mentioned that Beniel Dariush is a favorite here, but I didn't mention that his best available price, about minus 125 on Betway right now. You're looking at a plus 127 comeback on Cloudbet. Plus 125s basically in a lot of other places on Charles do Bronx Oliveira. So, plus money on do Bronx, that's come through a lot of times in the UFC. I'll just say that. Don't know if it's going to come through this time, but it's come through a lot of times in the UFC. One of the winningest underdogs, I'd have to think off the top of my head. I know Jan Blachowicz is up there. There's a couple guys. Glover Teixeira, I think, has been one as well. But love to see it when those guys that are consistently doubted and find a way to come through. But the other fights that we have to talk about the odds. I talked about the market with. We're looking at the Mike Malott side. Best available is on CloudBet -200 and +180 is the comeback on DraftKings. That's best available on the Fugitt side. So about +180 to +165. Very tight market with there for Fugitt. Next up, the Dan Ige fight, -245 on FanDuel, best available, +215 on DraftKings, best comeback on Nate the Train in the UFC. So if you want to keep riding that Nate the Train underdog run, I think this might be where it comes off the tracks, but he's also he's a guy that's going to go out there and fight for your money, right? And we talk about that conceptually. Sometimes you just want a guy that is going to put it all on the line, and sometimes Nate will get caught on the chin and get finished, knocked out cold. But when that doesn't happen, he's going to give you everything he's got until the referee stops the fight. So I think you always got to respect that about these guys. Next up, Eryk Anders taking on Marc-Andre Barriault. And this is the second Canadian on the card. He's going to come in here, I believe, as a slight favorite. Let me pop over to the odds here. Marc-Andre Barriault, best available, -138 on Betway. Looking at the best available comeback on Eryk Anders at +132. And, I haven't looked at the intangibles here, so I haven't even looked at the height, reach, anything on this fight. I'm a little surprised to see Eryk Anders as the underdog here. I think that Eryk Anders, he is, he's not a guy that stands out at any one thing, but he's very athletic. And he's able to land good, heavy shots. He can hurt guys when they're not expecting it. And I feel like we've been seeing better performances out of Eryk Anders recently. I'm going to pull up some Eryk Anders Tapology here and remind myself of his recent run in the UFC. So he lost a grappling decision to Joe Pyfer. He knocked out Kyle Dawkins, and that was a cool one for me. I bet the +600 there on Eryk Anders by knockout. That was my prop squad right up for the Action Network as well. So was super happy to see your boy Eryk Anders get back on track. But he lost a split decision to Jung Young Park. Guys, I could tell you, I had Jung Young Park that night. Oh, I don't know if he won that fight. That was a big bet for me. And I believe it was at -200. It was a bad bet. I could tell you, Eryk Anders was 100% the side. Jin Young Park did not win that fight clearly enough to justify the price. Did he win it? I would have to rewatch, but I felt gross on the night of. I felt bad for Eryk Anders. Bettors, I felt like they were hard done by that performance. So that's something to keep in mind. Andre Muniz. Stock at an all-time low for my guy, Andre Muniz, because he got absolutely audited by Brendan Allen. But I think he's still going to audit a lot of other guys in this middleweight division, to tell you the God's honest truth. I think Andre Muniz has very elite grappling, but he met a guy in Brendan Allen that's got good scrambling, good movement on the feet, didn't let him get a hold of him, and he just beat the hell out of him, and they always say in jiu-jitsu gyms, you get hit 10 times. You're not a black belt anymore. You're a brown belt, purple belt, all the way on down, right? You don't want to get beat up and hurt and damaged and then try and remember things sequentially. It's a hard thing to do. And he just had a hard time getting it to the ground. And when he did, he was getting audited by another black belt because he was more fatigued and he was more damaged. So just things to keep in mind there. I think that, if you put those two guys in the gi, we're probably having a whole different conversation. I think Andre Muniz might tie him in a pretzel. But when you're talking about what we're seeing in the UFC octagon, Brendan Allen was better prepared. He was the better man on that night. And a huge win for him there. But now back to Eryk Anders, who we're talking about right now. And he beat Darren Stewart. And he barely beat him the second time, right? I think because he kind of took him lightly. But the first time he fought him, he just absolutely assaulted him. So training in Arizona has been a good thing for him. Eryk Anders been getting in that different work in Arizona, got out of Alabama, got into a better training environment, took his career more seriously, invested in his career. And I think that that's been huge for him. I think the fight ready move has been significant. Marc-Andre Barriault, what does he bring to the table? He's got good cardio. He's got good pace. I don't think he's got significant power. So I think he's basically going to try and pace him. He's going to try and look for takedowns. He's going to try and wear on him. But I'm a little bit concerned for Marc-Andre Barriault here because he's got a big, powerful guy in front of him, and Eryk Anders, who's going to try and hurt him, who's going to try and hit him with big shots, who's going to try and test his chin and his willpower. And I don't think he's going to be very easy to out wrestle and out grapple here. Let's look at Marc-Andre Barriault and his recent run in the UFC. He's also been suspended for steroids for sure. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Or I should say for PDs. I don't know what he was doing. He beat Julian Marquez. He for Marc-Andre Barriault, now we're talking about Brian Anthony says that Anders left fight ready. So I will have to look into everybody's Instagram over the course of this week, guys, and make sure that their affiliations are where they say they are and things like that. But I was just going based on Tapology. I know he had moved out to Arizona. I'm not sure if he's done any moving since then. So if he has, please go on ahead and update me, or I will do my due diligence and correct the record for the Thursday show. But in the meantime, it's been up, down recently for Marc-Andre Barriault, and he's been finished in 2 of his last 4 fights. His wins were over Julian Marquez and Jordan Wright. So I feel like those wins don't really tell me much. Abu Azaitar win doesn't really tell me much. Oscar Pihota win doesn't really tell me much. And Jin Young Park, he beat the hell out of Marc-Andre Barriault in that fight, if my memory serves. So, yeah, I'll have to look into that though. I appreciate the shout, Brian, on Eryk Anders' training situation. So yeah, guys, for me, this is a fight where I'm not really looking to lay chalk with Marc-Andre Barriault very often. I think he's an all right fighter, but I don't think he's an exceptional athlete. I don't know that he takes the greatest punch all the time. I don't know that his cardio is necessarily head and shoulders above everybody else in the division, because we just saw obviously Fluffy Hernandez has some of the best cardio in the division, no doubt about that. But Fluffy Hernandez absolutely audited Marc-Andre Barriault, and he suffered injuries. He suffered a bunch of difficulties. So, they're putting him in a position to win, right? He's in a fight where he's favored in Canada. But I just don't think that Eryk Anders is a guy to sleep on either. I think he's a pretty tough guy, and I think he's pretty big fellow with a little bit more natural athleticism, a little bit more natural power, maybe a little bit more of a chance to finish this in the early going. So you might even find a better live price on the MAB side at some point during the fight, in my opinion. Next up, we've got Nassourdine Imavov taking on Chris Action Man Curtis. Action Man coming in here with way more professional experience than Nassourdine Imavov. That's something that stands out on paper. 40 professional fights compared to less than 20 for Nassourdine Imavov. And, we also just saw Imavov lose to a teammate of Chris Curtis. So, that's something where it's a little bit interesting that the UFC is matching him up this way. I found it very interesting, right? Cyril Gane went from being like the belle of the ball to losing to Ngannou, and then he is brought in to just be the absolute, guinea pig for John Jones' heavyweight experimentation, right? Which I found to be a little bit of the UFC kind of writing him off a little bit, kind of selling some stock on Cyril Gane. And now they've got Imavov fresh off of a short notice beating at the hands of Sean Strickland over 5 rounds. Nonetheless, 5 months later, he's back in there with Chris Curtis, another good puncher, another guy who can go a hard 15 minutes in the UFC. We just saw him basically get robbed on the scorecards, according to most people. I'll rewatch the fight and see what my opinion is after some objective rewatching. I didn't have any money on the fight, but I didn't give the closest watch because of that at the time. And there was a clash of heads. There was some controversy. Chris Curtis basically got knocked out, recovered, and kept fighting. Let me see how long ago that was, because that's my concern here for the Chris Curtis side. Is he's been in a lot of fights, and Nassourdine Imavov, they don't call him the Russian sniper for no reason. He definitely lands big, heavy shots, and he can connect early in fights and change the dynamic. So let's see how long our guy Chris Curtis has been on the shelf here. Excuse me. I'm trying to pull it up here. Chris Curtis, another extreme couture guy. That's another thing. One thing I like to keep note of is the UFC. They like to, I don't know if it's for travel reasons, for bringing in coaches, for whatever reason it is, but they like to bring in people from the same team for these fight cards. And so you notice Dan Ige and now another extreme couture fighter here, Chris Curtis. So a couple XC guys here going to be making the walk. There may even be others if I scan up and down the card, but we'll take a look at the win-loss for Action Man Chris Curtis. So, a somewhat controversial decision there goes against him versus Kelvin Gastelum. He beats Joaquin Buckley, who just exploded onto the scene in the welterweight division. He knocked him out, loses to Jack Hermanson, and Jack showed off the footwork there. He showed off some veteran savvy, some experience. Imavov, not necessarily doing that over the course of 15 hard minutes all the time. He's really struggled in terms of his cardio and his pacing. I was embarrassed by that Imavov performance because I thought he was going to beat Strickland. I thought he was the better, cleaner striker, and he just didn't have the gas to go. And the ABC say always bet on cardio, man. Chris Curtis, I think, just has better cardio, a little bit more savvy, a little bit more veteran experience. And I think that Daz is right. Jack Hermanson exposed Chris Curtis, but Jack Hermanson has the cardio to go. He can do it for 15 minutes. He can go hard 25. He went the hard 25 with Marvin Vettori. So I just think that, when it comes to Jack Hermanson, not sold on him as like a top 5 guy or something like that, but he's not an easy guy to beat either, especially if you can't grapple, if you can't take it there. And for me, this is a fight where I don't think the power is huge for Chris Curtis. I think he's got, moderate power. But I do think that he's probably just got a little bit more fundamental striking for 15 minutes here. I think Imavov in the early going, though, is going to be live, certainly, because oh, wow. Oh, wow. Let me double check that. Am I reading this correctly? Hold on here. Jeez. I don't know if it's fight odds or Tapology that's making this run so slow. So my apologies here, folks. All right, here we go. Wow. Yeah, this is a really quick turnaround. 2 months turnaround here from Chris Curtis basically being knocked out in a fight against Kelvin Gastelum. I don't really love that either. So situational, I think that maybe this favors Imavov slightly, but overall, this seems like a pass fight for me. 2 guys that have a lot to prove that both really need to win right now. So motivation you'd expect would be really high. I don't know if there was a canceled bout here or what led to this fight, but for me, there's just a lot that makes me uneasy about this matchup. I'm trying to figure out who's going to win. I think that Imavov obviously is going to fare better in 15-minute fights where he knows that he could, push the pedal to the floor a little bit more. But even Phil Hawes was able to beat this guy by decision. So it's not like he's been on a perfect run there either. I think that's a problem for him. Chris Curtis got a lot of high-level experience outside the UFC, was on a huge win streak at one point in his career. So 2 guys that have a lot of talent. And also, I got to just say, Chris Curtis, Cincinnati, Ohio, represent 2 states I put on for, New York and Ohio, baby. New York first. Of course, I'm a damn New Yorker to the day I die, but got to put on for those Ohio boys as well. Tough guys out there in Ohio. So shout out. Next up, we are closing out the main card, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what we got. And guys, if you've got anything that you're in love with, a bet that you love, a question that you have, something you want to talk about, go ahead and fire those off in the chat as well. But I'm sure that the Rogers Arena in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada is going to be absolutely rocking for a prelim matchup between Jasudavicious against Miranda Maverick. And, Miranda Maverick has been a little bit of a money train for me in the UFC. I was able to find some nice ITD and some sub plays along the way at good plus money odds. She's a pretty significant favorite here. Jasmine was kind of audited a little bit by Natalia Silva, who was able to stuff her takedowns, keep it on the feet, land a lot of damaging strikes, take over in a lot of situations, and really made her work hard there. But speaking of Mike Malott and Niagara Top Team, his teammate at Niagara Top Team is Jasmine Jasudavicious. So she's getting high level work. She has good training partners. She works very hard by all accounts. She seems very tough. She seems like a very game girl that wants to be in there, that wants to fight. But I think she's got her hands full with Miranda Maverick. Miranda Maverick, very smart fighter, very intelligent young lady, has all the skills, in my opinion, on the ground. She's got a lot of physical intangibles. She's very strong. I think that she can match Jasmine in a lot of the strength. The one concern I have is, Jasmine's got a lot of length. She's put in a lot of effort into the wrestling and the grappling phases. And at times, we've seen Miranda Maverick give up one bad position, make one mistake and just have her have it cost her a round, something like that. I think that this was a good point from Daz right here. Jasmine looks bigger. Close fight in Canada could be a robbery decision. That is something I always worry about, right? Because when you're talking about fights that could go to the cards, I don't know that Mike Malott and Adam Fugitt is going to see the cards. I just think that's going to get settled by those two individuals. But this is a fight that I think could see the cards. When Miranda Maverick's fighting girls that don't want to quit, that really want to fight, that want to stay in there, that want to be gritty, that want to be tough, unless she submits them by just being better technically at jiu-jitsu and finding her spots and doing some damage and opening up and things like that, unless she does that, she's going to have a hard time finishing more often than not. So if it goes to decision, that becomes anybody's fight. She's gotten some stuff done with like a close shot. I think she got a TKO stoppage due to a cut one time as well. Yeah, I think it's a really compelling, fascinating fight. And I think it's one of the more interesting fights, outside of top competition that you could give to Miranda Maverick, because I don't think Jasmine's easy to out wrestle and out grapple. Though I think it's possible for Miranda Maverick. And I think that Miranda's going to have to navigate, dealing with the striking against somebody that's got some length and some abilities of her own. So it's a good matchup stylistically. And I understand why Miranda Maverick is favored. I think that she's put together a very solid run and a very solid career. But I would be just a little bit worried about the judges. I would be a touch worried about the judges here. Yeah, and I also agree with my guy Daz. He says Jasmine's tough. She's going to bring it. I think so too. So shout out. We got a lot of sharp people in here. Gerardo Hernandez says he's got Miranda Maverick by decision. So best of luck, brother. No bets for me yet on this fight, but I do think it is compelling matchmaking. Next up, an underdog that I do consider live here, and I haven't bet it. I'm going to wait and see where this line shakes out to. But Aiemann Zahabi, I bet Aiemann Zahabi against Tercios, and I got a lot of hate there. And it wasn't a great fight, but he does a good job negating other people's offense. There's a lot of different ways to win MMA fights. Sometimes, you have to go out there and be the alpha and take people down and get on top of them, knock them out with a big shot or whatever it is. But sometimes you have to just do things that prevent them from getting off clean offense and finding your own ways to score. And so Zahabi, he does a pretty good job negating other people's offense. He feints, he moves, he creates angles. He's been caught, he's been starched before. He's not the most athletic guy in the world, but he's well coached. He's a guy that has pretty good counter mechanics. And he's landed a big knockout, took Draco Rodriguez right out of the UFC. And also on top of that, against Tercios, a guy who's known for his volume, known for getting off on all these shots. He ends up muting a lot of his volume, landing some big shots over the top, changing the complexion of the fight. So I think that Zahabi is probably the side here. But that being said, Aoriqileng is nothing to be trifled with. And I think, I want to go look at his typology and see what his training situation's been like. As long as hopefully it's updated, right? Obviously, I'll do a deep dive throughout the week, but I'm pretty sure he's another one of these guys who might be training at Fight Ready. And I think he's been showing up looking good physically, looking in great shape, throwing with a lot of power. And he's the guy that's got more fights here. The Mongolian murderer, Aoriqileng, great nickname. Beat Jay Perrin by decision. That's a little bit of a red flag. I kid. Knocked out Cameron Ellis. So, yeah, I think he is out of Fight Ready. Let me check here. It says Zindu Martial Arts Club on Tapology. I'm not so sure about that. I believe he's training in the States. He lost a decision to Jeff Molina and a decision to Cody Durden. So I don't think that those are terrible losses that I'd hold too harshly against him. And he's fought a lot, man. He's got a lot of experience under his belt. So I don't think he's anybody to sleep on. I would not want to, quickly lay chalk against the guy either. But I think that, in this fight, I would probably just lean towards plus money. That would kind of be my read here. I think it's going to be very close. I think they probably fight to a split decision type of fight here. It might come down to Aoriqileng looking for some takedowns, looking to get on top. But I don't know if I really rate his game. And I think Zahabi's kind of clever. Made some good adjustments after getting knocked out. We don't have to talk too much about this one. And I wish there was a little bit more to say on some of these matchups, guys. But, number one, I'll have more to say after I do some due diligence here as well. But number two, there's just some fighters here that aren't very experienced, and that you normally don't see at the UFC level. Talking about fighters that only have 2 and 3 UFC fights fighting on pay-per-view cards, but that's what we're dealing with. That's what we got, and so that's what we're going to talk about, and we're going to find as much enjoyment and as much discernible information here as we can along the way. Next up, our last and fifth Canadian on the card. For those of you keeping track at home, we got Kyle. I believe it's the Monster Nelson taking on Blake Bilder. And Blake Bilder, he's a guy that I have a hard time getting a beat on because, when you look at Blake Bilder, he's definitely had some adversity in his fights. He's had times where he was dropped. He had times where he was getting knocked down. He had times where he's eating some clean shots. He had times where he's looking a little bit sketchy, but he's found the results, 8-0-1 in his career, done a pretty good job going out there and getting the win. And he's coming off the Contender Series. The UFC kind of seems like they're giving him a winnable fight. Kyle Nelson seems like they're doing the same thing. Kyle Nelson, he's not a very high-level UFC guy, but he's stuck around. He's done a lot of tough jobs for the company. He's taken some beatings. He's moved around weight classes. He's been in a lot of fun fights too. He likes to go out there. He likes to swing. He likes to be in fun back and forth exchanging fights. So I kind of worry about Nelson in the wrestling and the grappling here against Bilder. I think Bilder likes to engage in those spots. I think Bilder on the feet is definitely liable here, though. I think this is a fight that probably trends towards an under. I think both these guys kind of fight with a little bit of panic, a little bit of wildness to their game, a little bit of unpredictability. So yeah, I think it's a really tricky fight for me. I definitely need to do more due diligence before I part with money in a fight like this. But just thinking about it off the rip, Kyle Nelson, he has a lot of UFC experience to be a big underdog against somebody like this. So, but yeah, I think Daz is not wrong about this. Kyle Nelson is a bum, not gonna lie. I think at the UFC level, Kyle Nelson is not very good. But I also do have a little bit of question marks about Blake Bilder. Um, still not totally sold. I think he's a little bit older coming in as a UFC prospect, if my memory serves as well. So let me just double check that. I don't want to speak out of turn on the gentleman. We'll bring it back to Tapology here. But just from memory, I felt like Blake Bilder was in his mid 30s, and I felt like he had a pretty suspect chin. Was my memories of taping him on the Contender Series, and I thought that he looked good on the Contender Series. I think um, he's done a pretty decent job. I don't want to take anything away from him. He's 32 years of age, same age as Kyle Nelson here. And Kyle Nelson, out of House of Champions MMA in Canada, is going to have a 3-inch reach advantage, 3-inch height advantage, bunch more UFC experience. But, a lot of his UFC experience is getting the tar beaten out of him as well. So, how much is that good for? So I think that Blake Bilder probably deserves to be a favorite here. But, I just wouldn't minus 200 is a little bit rich for my blood for a guy, I believe, making his UFC debut. And let me just double check that. No, he did make his debut against Shane Young. One other thing to note here, the UFC having Blake Bilder take on Shane Young in Australia and Kyle Nelson in Canada. What are they, just having this guy go on a pay-per-view tour or something? I like it. Maybe Blake Bilder is somebody that they got their eye on. You always got to pay attention to who the UFC likes. I think the UFC might like this guy based on that. Or they might hate him, sending him to all these foreign lands to hopefully get beat by the home fighter. Maybe that's it, right? Depends how you think about it. But yeah, I think Blake is a wild fighter to be a 65% implied favorite. I agree with Daz's take in the chat. And guys, we got 51 people rocking with us live. I want to ask each and every one of you to do me the personal favor of getting subscribed to the channel. If you are not already, please drop a like on this video. Trying to get out here on a Sunday. I know there's not that much content in the MMA world on Sundays. Trying to change that, trying to get after it. And, starting at midnight as Sunday's drawn to a close, as people are getting ready for Monday morning. I don't know when this show is going to reach you, but whenever you're watching this, I appreciate you truly. And I hope that you'll support me by just dropping a subscribe, drop a like on the video. It helps out tremendously. And with that being said, we can move along to the next fight. We're at the bottom of this barrel, guys. We're at the dregs of the card. Nothing too good left to discuss, but we will find a way to make what's the expression? We'll turn some crap into to something usable here. We got David Dvorak versus Steve Erceg, and this is an interesting one, guys, because I do find it to be a curious case. Dvorak had some momentum. He got some wins in the UFC, but at a pretty low level. I felt like overall, Dvorak then kind of been getting audited in his recent fights, has not looked so good. Let's go back through the David Dvorak ledger. He's 20-5. Got a great nickname, The Undertaker, right? But 2 losses in a row now in the UFC. Manel Cap loses by unanimous decision there. Got hurt a couple times. Had a tough go of it. Mateus Nicolau. Those are 2 high-level guys, though, man. I think that's why he's still favored here. I think the book, just giving him the benefit of the doubt. You fight 2 really solid guys, it's tough sailing. Prior to that, had wins over Juan Camilo Randeros. Not sure what to make of that. Jordan Espinoza, pretty low-level win in the UFC. The guy's been cut. Bruno Silva, that's a decent win. That's aged okay. And that was his UFC debut. I'm pretty sure that was Bruno Silva before he discovered, supplements, to put that politely. But otherwise, this guy put together a pretty dang good run in terms of the wins on paper, what they looked like. But then you go look at the records, he wasn't fighting very high level comp. When he started fighting good guys, he started to get audited a little bit. He's still been very tough. He hasn't been easy to put away. But Erceg here coming in, he's a tough guy in his own right. He's a talented guy. So I don't think that I don't think that you can really count out this guy, Erceg, as a dog. Let's go check what FightOdds.io has to say here about the odds range for this Erceg fight. Not every book has come to market yet, but you're seeing as high as plus 320 on DraftKings and plus 280 on Bet Online. So the much sharper book here, 40 cents down on that underdog price. And yeah, I think Erceg definitely a live dog. So I'm going to be waiting to see what other U.S. domestics open him up at, and I'll consider a play there. But I think Dvorak, definitely got to give him credit as the UFC guy, tested at the level. But Erceg, he's fought UFC, proximity type guys and shown he can compete. So not going to count him out. 9-1 record, half the pro experience. So got to say, way more experience for David Dvorak, but against who? I think Erceg's tested himself well. From Perth, Western Australia, fought Paul Loga, Shannon Ross, and his only loss is via decision. On the amateur scene, lost to Denise Bondar in 2019. And Denise Bondar, not a bad fighter, but did get beat by my guy Malcolm X Gordon, that everybody sleeps on and just talks about how he's a terrible black belt. But he gave Makayev a run, and he broke Denise Bondar's arm. So y'all better stop sleeping on this guy, Malcolm X Gordon. But for me, I think that, Erceg as an underdog, a little bit tempting here. Dvorak off 2 losses. It's a little bit harder to get behind him, although it's fair to say that those losses are to very good competition. He was supposed to have a different opponent here, so he's accepting on short notice a new opponent against a tough guy. That's not easy stuff, man. So God bless him for it. Tough guy for taking on the challenge, but maybe not great career management. Diana Belbita, I think, is the last fighter that people were mentioning. Maybe she trains out of Canada. I'm going to check and pull up her record here. She's fighting against Maria Spider Girl Oliveira out of Brazil. So should be a fun women's strawweight fight to kick us off. But this is low level, guys. We've got 2 girls that have struggled a little bit in the UFC. For Diana Belbita, she's lost to Molly McCann. She lost to Liana Jajua via armbar round 1. She lost to Gloria De Paula, and she beat Hannah Goldie. She was supposed to fight Loma Lubunmi. The fight got canceled. So she's really struggled. She is out of House of Champions MMA as well in Canada. So training out of Canada, she gets that rub here, but she is born in Romania. So Romanian by way of Canada. I'm just playing around now. But for me, oh boy, let's look at the record for Maria Oliveira, because I don't even want to put anything on stone until I look at this. I mean, I think both these women have a lot of improving to do, a lot of growing to do. So she lost to Vanessa Demopoulos. She lost to Tabitha Ricci. And I think the Tabitha Ricci one, I'll take nothing away from her. And she beat Gloria De Paula by split. Yo, I did not think that Maria Oliveira won that fight when I first watched it. So I'll have to rewatch it. Also, apologies, guys. I did not want to brew coffee at this late hour as I normally do. But I want to be able to sleep tonight so I can wake up early and get a jump on the day tomorrow. So apologies for the yawn there, but I'm feeling great. Overall, Gloria De Paula, has terrible takedown defense. So she gives up some, bad takedowns and some poor visuals in her fights. But I don't know. I'm just not convinced that, Maria Oliveira is anything to write home about. She is coming in here as a slight favorite. But guys, this matchup is actually available at widely different odds on different sports books. So I'm looking right now. Betway has Maria Oliveira listed at minus 105. compared to Jazz Sportsbook at minus 136, Bet Online at minus 130, most sportsbooks at minus 120. So if you have Betway, if you have access to Betway, you may want to get down on that Maria Oliveira side, just for potential ARB and cash out equity that will become available on the other side, because right now you would have a negative synthetic hold. You can get Diana Belbita as high as plus 112 on Jazz, plus 110 on Bet Online, plus 109 on Pinnacle, and plus 111 on Cloudbet. So shout out to fightodds.io, actually listing some odds in real time for sportsbooks. Hopefully bestfightodds.com can be saved. It would be beautiful if we saw that happen. My guy Moy says Belbita by KO, check right hook, save this message. I love it. Somebody with conviction on this fight. I think that Belbita will have an advantage here. But I'm not like sold on it, right? So would I lean towards her as the side at plus money? Absolutely. Would I be thrilled to run out there and back her if she was the chalk side? No, I would not. So for me, hopefully more Maria Oliveira money keeps coming in, and maybe we get a good price that will tempt me on the Canadian by proxy Diana Belbita. But guys, there you have it. That's my first look at UFC 289. If you guys have any questions, comments, things that you want to get off your chest about the card, about any upcoming UFC fights, about anything in the news of combat sports, about any concepts in MMA, betting questions, stuff that happened on the last UFC card, anything you want to get off your chest, we'll leave a couple minutes for that right now. And in the meantime, I thank you all for being here. Had an absolute blast. I do have one bet already on the card that I sent out in the Lab VIP. And it was basically a bet where, I'm taking a little bit of a stab on an underdog here. And I normally don't bet underdogs early in the week, right? So why am I betting this underdog early in the week? Because most sports books are pricing this one differently, right? So sometimes when you see these outlier prices, you want to get down a little bit so that way, you have options. If the number improves and goes the way that you want and you get a better price, great. Then go ahead, take that number as it improves later on. So you could dollar cost average and get closer to the number that you want. However, nothing hurts worse in betting than when you have a number in front of you that you consider playable and you miss it because you're trying to get an even better number, right? So for me, you got to know, what number do I consider this playable at? Then you're saying to yourself, okay, I got this. This is a playable number for me right here. Then it's how much do I want to play at this number versus another number? Because it's all about the amount of edge that you have, right? If you think you have a 5% edge, you should be betting a little bit. But if you think I have a 10% edge, I should be betting a little bit more. Does that make sense? I hope that it does, right? So for me, I think that at a certain number, at a plus, 2xx, a plus whatever, that's a good number. But could it get better? Could it improve? Will I see plus 3xx? Will I see plus 4xx? On all these different numbers, that's what you want to ask yourself, because you want to get the best number that you can on the side that you want to bet. And you have to want to get value. So if I think that there's value to be had on the line, which in this case I do, then I have to ask myself, how much value at this price versus another price? And do I think it's going to move? There's an art and a science to betting, right? There's numbers behind it. Is it going to be, plus 250 or this? That has a real break-even point. That has a real, percentage that it implies. But there's also the art of betting, knowing that underdog prices sometimes will blow up right before the fight's about to go off. The parlay liability's gotten huge. The sportsbook needs to sell that underdog, right? You got to understand the art and the science. So for me, that's something that I'm going to be doing this week. Is I'm going to be patient. The public comes in heavily on pay-per-views after weigh-ins on fight day. You got to know that going in. So if you want to get down, one thing I'm going to let you guys know, in my opinion, the lines will get much sharper between now and Tuesday, because what's going to happen is sportsbooks will slowly start turning that lever up, how much money they let people bet. And as they do that, as they start increasing the limits, the lines are going to get sharper and sharper. They're going to have more exposure. They're going to have more sharp players that bet into it. People that bet really early are normally sharp. Okay. So if the line starts getting corrected today, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, okay, that's something to watch for. A favorite starts moving really significant. Oh, that's something to pay attention to. Late in the week, right? The movement could be a little bit more difficult to read. Yeah, it could be a absolute sharp play, or it could have been a deluge of public money that is pushing a dead side, that's pushing the wrong side out to a bigger favorite, that's just running the parlay liability in the wrong direction. So these are just things that you learn as you experience this sport over and over. Last thing I'll mention here, look at how the card is structured, right? We've got a lot of big favorites on this fight card. I'm going to go count right now on fightodds.io, but I believe that we've got at least 5 fights here with an over 2-1 favorite. I could be mistaken. It could even be more than that. So we've got Blake Bilder over a 2-1 favorite. We've got David Dvorak over a 2-1 favorite. We've got Miranda Maverick over a 2-1 favorite, over a 3-1 favorite, as a matter of fact. David Dvorak over a 3-1 favorite. Dan Ige over a 2-1 favorite. Mike Malott over a 2-1 favorite. And Amanda Nunes over a 3-1 favorite. So we've got a lot of big favorites on the card, guys. What does that tell me? That tells me there's going to be parlay city. It's going to be a lot of parlays. Okay. And I love my parlay homies, right? Some weeks, y'all parlay homies eat, right? It goes chalk, 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 chalk all the way down. And I say, God bless you for it. Because sometimes y'all eat. Sometimes the underdog bettors eat. And I think that on pay-per-views, sometimes big underdog bettors eat, right? Because they're willing to take these big risks. They're willing to stand against the market. They're willing to stand against the big masses and hordes of people that come in, the public, the great wide public that I love, right? And some of them watch my show. I appreciate you. But we also have the sharpest chat in the game. And you guys know that when you're seeing a lot of big favorites, somebody's got to go kablooey. Las Vegas wasn't made on parlays coming through every time. They were made on parlays going kabusto. So you got to remember that. And I think that, my guy Daz, he's been very active tonight in the chat, and I truly appreciate it. My man's rocking today. He's got a lot to say. He said LFG Fugitt, right? Fugitt's a potential parlay buster. In my opinion, right? This is how simply I could break it down for you guys. And this is not definitive, right? This doesn't mean it's going to happen every time, 10 out of 10 times, but I'm saying on 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 pay-per-view cards, when you've got this many big favorites, the sportsbook is going to need at least one of the following fighters to come through. At least, and maybe multiples. They're going to need at least one of Kyle Nelson, Steve Erceg, Jasmine Jasudavicious, Adam Fugitt, Nate Landwehr, or Irene Aldana. They're going to need at least one, and I would reckon 2 or 3 of those big dogs to come through to bail them out from parlay liability. I truly think that that's something to watch out for here. So do your own due diligence, right? We're going to come back for the Thursday show, much better equipped with research, matchup analysis, specifically how they've performed in their odds range, everything like that, down to a science. But if you want first access to all my information, that stuff is in the description box below. If you guys have questions, comments, concerns, if you want to see a certain guest on the show, if you want to see more content from the channel that you haven't seen yet, if you have questions about other things in the world of combat sports outside the UFC, go ahead and drop those below the video in the comment section below, and happy to address each and every one of those as well. Had a lot of people interact in the comments over the last few weeks with positive feedback, with criticism, with things that I could do to improve the show. And I truly appreciate it because at the end of the day, it's us good guys versus the bookies each and every week. Cheers to each and every one of you guys that's watching the show. God bless you all. We got Library has been silent all night. He came in with just one today. He's coming in hot. I have said nothing about this. I've tried to keep it very hush hush. I just want to move on with my life. But the truth is, he just told me one day he doesn't want to be on the show no more. It's all good. God bless for it. I think happy to continue doing what I'm doing. Before he was on the show, we had a lot of success. Since he's been gone, we've been having a lot of success. It's all good. There's only one direction in life. It's forward. Guys, don't dwell on shit that goes sideways. Somebody doesn't want to work with you, just move on, right? Don't work with them. It's like that for me is a simple path in life. If you don't want to work with me, I'll handshake and God bless. And we keep going. So I appreciate I appreciate everybody that rocks with this show, that's stuck with the show. And I appreciate people that tune in to these first looks at the card. Not everybody does, but I appreciate y'all soldiers that rock with us on a Sunday night. I also appreciate the people that come in on the Thursday shows as well. I'm going to have a lot of continuing great guests in the future. Friends of the show, some people that you guys know, some people that you love, also some new talent, people that are looking for a platform. So if you think that you fit the bill as well for somebody that should be on the show, that has something to say, that has a track record, please, by all means, get at me and be happy to try and figure something out as well. So in the meantime, guys, want to just say these last things to close us out. Number one, I will be back on Thursday at 3 o'clock, 3:30, something around that range. You could stay tuned for announcements. You can find me everywhere at Liam Picks Fights and reach out to me on those platforms. Appreciate when you do. And I will try and timestamp this video as soon as possible so you guys can click around and see my thoughts on the fights. But just know we will make it official with our leans, our predictions, and update the record on Thursday. So the last thing we'll leave you with, God bless you all. Enjoy those fights. Until next time, come back on Thursday and we'll have some more fun. We'll break down the fights and we'll do it all again. Take care, everybody. Appreciate your support.